I believe we are live here. It looks like George Karlaftis has been extended. Give me a couple seconds to get everything set up here. But it looks like it was a 4 year, $93 million deal. Remember, just yesterday I had talked about the possibility that it would be what was it? Right around $24.99 million per year because of the rate of what sacks get paid in the NFL. I am trying desperately to get this figured out and make sure that I have this live. Let me see if I can. I will be pulling up sources in just a moment and seeing if we can get something good going on. But there is a CBS article lining out what it was for which George Karlaftis re-signed. If you were here in the chat, let me know. Things are not quite working on my end, so I apologize for this. But again, we are seeing George Karlaftis be re-signed before Trent McDuffie. Is that something you would have expected? I don't think a lot of people would have expected this. I am unable to find this on my. Yeah, I can't do anything here. I am totally locked. But let me pull up a source real quick. We'll see if we can get this part of things underway. This is breaking, so I apologize for this. From Sports Illustrated, Chiefs sign defender George Karlaftis to massive 4-year contract extension. The former first-round pick is now tied to Kansas City through the 2030 season. The Kansas City Chiefs have locked up one of their own heading into the 2025 season. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, defensive end George Karlaftis has agreed with the franchise on a 4-year, $93 million contract extension. 4-year, $93 million. The massive deal includes $62 million guaranteed and ties the 24-year-old to Kansas City through the 2030 season. Now, we've kind of seen an escalation in the guaranteed money that Brett Veach has been giving out. But really, I don't think that is quite the biggest sin in the world, because I don't think you're moving on from George Karlaftis. I think that what you are doing with George Karlaftis is assuming that you have a long-term starter, and once you have that wrapped up, you move on to other stuff. So guarantee the money because it gets them to sign the deal. You're not moving on from them anyway. Nothing is working for me right now, so I apologize. So if you were here, K in the house, and so is Vendell Malone. Good to see both of you guys here with some breaking news. Let's see if the ESPN article has anything else. Karlaftis was drafted number 30. I hate it when they do this. They just devolve into sort of regular talking points on what is going on. Let's see if I can pull something up from myself yesterday and see if I can get this. Yeah. So this was a rumor from Pretty Ricky just a couple days ago. White boy summer for edge rushers continues as the Chiefs are closing in on a new deal with George Karlaftis. So let me go through the numbers one more time. So yesterday I had made a video about why would you do this if you were the Kansas City Chiefs. You want to make sure that your all-pro talent, namely Trent McDuffie, is someone that you can re-sign. So why would you risk throwing out the money on George Karlaftis before you get Trent McDuffie wrapped up? Well, I don't think you do. I think that probably where the Chiefs are is the Chiefs have some type of understanding on what it will take to re-sign Trent McDuffie. a lot of the big deals have already been wrapped up for cornerbacks that are on the market or are going to hit the market. So that being true, that being the case, you kind of have the blueprint of what it will cost. Now, you still want to get the deal done before Trent McDuffie has another all-pro season, etc. But here is where I think part of this motivation comes into play. I brought up a lot of numbers from other people yesterday, other edge rushers, and the contracts that they signed. And TJ Watt just signed a great big deal for 3 years, $123 million. That's a $41 million average, and he is 30 years old. Then you have Trey Hendrickson. This is a projected total. I don't think it's going to be this big, but there's a projected total for Trey Hendrickson of who is also 30 years old. 3 years, $130 million, which is a $43.5 million per year average for 11.9 sacks per season on average. Then you have Myles Garrett, 29 years old, signed a 4-year, $160 million deal, a $40 million average. And Myles Garrett puts up 14.9 sacks per season. Then you have Max Crosby, double X Max, 27 years old, signed a 3-year, $106.5 million contract. That is a $35.5 million average, a 10.6 sack per season average. Then you have Nick Bosa at 27 years old, 5 years, $170 million, really loves the Bay Area, I suppose, a $34 million average for a 13 sack per season player. And finally, Danielle Hunter, sort of the last of these big names here. 1 year, $35.6 million. He is 30 years old as well, a $36.5 million per year average. Oh no. I have transposed numbers. So it's either a $35.6 million deal or a $36.5 million deal. I apologize for transposing those numbers in one of those cases. That is a 12.4 sack average. So what is going on here is that with these players, with these higher end players, you're looking at an average of $38.26 million per season. You're looking at an average of 13 sacks per season, which means that on the average season for these players, you are paying them $2.94 million per sack. $2.94 million per sack. George Karlaftis has a career average of 8.5 sacks per season. So 8.5 sacks per season. We are seeing a 4-year, $93 million deal, which means that 93 divided by 4. Give me 1 second here, guys. 93 divided by 4 is 23.5 divided by 8.5. So the big boys in the NFL get an average of $2.94 million per sack. George Karlaftis is being paid $2.76 million per sack. Yesterday, I had put out a video saying, what would it be to extend George Karlaftis? And I put out there that it could be $24.99 million per season. It is not that. That would be $2.94 million per sack times the 8.5 sack average. That would be a 3-year, $75 million, 4-year, $100 million type contract. It is not quite that high. Now, interestingly, when you're looking at Mike Dana's contract, Mike Dana is being paid $1.67 million per sack, not being counted on to be an every down starter. George Karlaftis I put together these numbers yesterday for that video as well. 722 snaps per season. So that is a great big average statistic there. 722 snaps per season. So when you're talking about this average here for George Karlaftis of $23.5 million per season, yeah, it ends up being $2.76 million per sack. But you're also looking at a guy who plays an awful lot of snaps for you. You are looking at a guy who averages 722 snaps per season, averages 8.5 sacks per season, averages 5 pass breakups per season, averages 38 tackles per season, averages 8 tackles for loss, 13 hurries, 8 knockdowns, and 31 pressures per season. So this is a substantial deal for the Kansas City Chiefs. But like I said yesterday, if the Kansas City Chiefs can get George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie wrapped up for the long term, there is no reason to believe that this cannot remain a top 10 type defense for the next half decade. You add that to an offense where Patrick Mahomes might suddenly have himself a franchise left tackle that will translate to a top 10 offense every season. There's no way Patrick Mahomes steps on the field with a top flight left tackle and does not have himself a top flight offense in general. So I think that what we are looking at here is Brett Veach attempting to really sort of wrap up the defensive side of the ball from a stalwart standpoint. We're getting into the later stages of Chris Jones' career, getting into the later stages of where Chris Jones will be as productive as he has been. And remember, he fell off pretty hard last season. There's nothing saying he can't rebound from that, but it did in fact happen. So being able to keep these stalwart players at other positions, your George Karlaftis is a plus starter. Nick Bolton is a plus starter. Trent McDuffie, if you can get that wrapped up, that is an absolutely elite starter, which gives you a star at all 3 levels of the defense, even if Chris Jones eventually hangs them up. Who knows? Maybe he'll never retire. Going to the comments here, Arrowhead is in the house. How you doing, Arrowhead? Flynn says, I'm curious how this signing impacts the cap space. I do not know at this point. I do not have any insight into the breakdown yet. The only articles that I have just sort of listed the 4-year $94 million or $93 million mark. So I'm assuming probably at some point soon, we will get those numbers and further understand how they impact this season. But that's a great point, because the Chiefs had, I believe, $20 million of cap space after everything was said and done, and prior to the George Karlaftis signing, this being a 23 point whatever million dollar per year average. Difficult to imagine that they can re-sign Trent McDuffie now. Here's the thing with Trent McDuffie. You can still get him through this season on the money he's making, and then you could franchise tag him twice if you wanted to. I don't think they want to go that route. I don't think they'll have to go that route, but it is something that they could do. I think that the salary cap situation for this, we've seen the Chiefs backload contracts in the past. That is those last couple seasons, last year, last 2 years, is where there's no guaranteed money, which is how Brett Veach has been doing it. And that might be how this contract is. But that doesn't help us with the Trent McDuffie situation, because I don't think that you're going to be able to get George Karlaftis on this first season being like 10 million, right? So I don't think that it's going to escalate that heavily. McDuffie is next, says Cole. Yeah, we have to hope so, right? That is the hope here in Kansas City, that Trent McDuffie is the next guy up. Uh, K. Wayne says guys like George Karlaftis are hard to find. That is true. That's very true. Now, I've made a point several times to say that he's not an elite player, and I think that's, he's not. But he is I think, the next tier down, right? And so if an elite player is one in every 250 draft picks, then a George Karlaftis is about one in every 100 draft picks, right? You don't get guys that come in and average 722 snaps for your defense. Just don't complain and make all the plays that are there to be made. You don't get those guys very often. Flynn says 2 years from now, he will be worth 33 to 38 million per year. What a bargain. That's true as well. What we are seeing with a very quickly expanding salary cap is that players' contracts are coming along and resetting the market. And then in the matter of just a couple seasons, they are also ran contracts. They're not great big sort of gluttonous contracts. They're not an albatross on the roster. They're just run-of-the-mill deals. So I think really that actually kind of helps the Kansas City Chiefs in a weird way, because if you are a malcontent on a different team, then it becomes one of these things where you can just constantly ask for more money, right? Because there's money there to be doled out. And if your team doesn't have money there to be doled out, well, screw them. They need to trade me. And we don't see that here with the Kansas City Chiefs because these players are not malcontents. Vindell says, hit that button, please, and subscribe. I appreciate you, Vindell. I have done this every day for 2.5 years, next to 3 years, sometime soon. And I just like spending the time with you guys. So if I do get more subscribers, if I do get more people finding the channel, that would be awesome, but not the biggest deal in the world to me. I'm just a small corner of the cafe kind of guy anyhow. Kevin says, with all the comparisons to the Patriots dynasty, this is the one major difference. I would hate to see this dynasty pass and not have several names that end up in the Ring of Honor. I think they already have several names that are going to end up in the Ring of Honor. They've already got one probably that'll end up in the Ring of Honor that's already gone in Tyreek Hill. I don't know that you can have a legitimate Ring of Honor and not have Tyreek Hill on there. You can look at that Ring of Honor and see all of the players from that Super Bowl, the only Super Bowl that the Chiefs won prior to Patrick Mahomes, and you see all of those names up there, and that's exactly how this team is going to be. That's exactly how these teams are going to be. Patrick Mahomes will be up there. Travis Kelce will be up there. Trey Smith will be up there. Creed Humphrey will be up there. I think that there's going to be an argument for Isaiah Pacheco at some point if he has a decent season this year. And you can argue with me all you want, but all you have to do is look at that Ring of Honor and see the players who have fewer accolades to their name, fewer rings on their fingers. Basically, anyone who started multiple Super Bowls for the Kansas City Chiefs is going to have a legitimate shot to be in the Ring of Honor, if not now, then soon, once they build their new stadium in North Kansas City. Sean says, would like to try to get Watson signed now and McDuffie next year. That's an interesting take. Watson has very little there's very little action on his name. He has very few accolades in the NFL. I think that he is an absolutely solid corner. He is a starting level corner. He was a 7th round pick. I would like to see him get signed. That's an interesting take, because you would have to, at that point, be assuming that Christian Fulton plays out his contract, Trent McDuffie plays out his contract, and Jalen Watson is going to be your cornerback 3. I think that if you're Jalen Watson, I don't think you do that deal. If you're Jalen Watson, I think you bet on yourself in free agency. Because I just don't think that type of money is what I think someone just like George Karlaftis, though. I said the same sort of thing about George Karlaftis. I thought someone was going to throw an absolute bag of money at him, and I do think they might have, but he is not testing that market. I think someone is going to throw one of these Tershawn Wharton type contracts at Jalen Watson. Scott says, "Let's go Chiefs. I'm happy to have Furious George for years to come." Absolutely, Scott. That is a very underrated player on the defense here. Chiefs Blitz says $88 million extension. The deal has a max value of $93 million in new money, with $32 million fully guaranteed at signing and another $30 million in injury guarantees that roll into full guarantees. It's a massive contract, Chiefs Blitz. It is an absolutely massive contract. Again, I'm going to go back to this, though. So I did the math here. The big boys in the NFL get paid an average of $2.94 million per sack. George Karlaftis is making $2.76 million per sack at this point in his career. I think that the bet has to be that the Chiefs think George Karlaftis is going to have a better season than he has had recently, and so he would have upped those sack numbers, and you would end up having to pay him more at the end of this season. Remember, he's had one good season. He's had a couple pretty good seasons. So if he has another good season, or even, dare I say it, a great season, then the contract itself would have ended up being much, much bigger. Arrowhead says, "I like the signing. He is a real solid player, and he's always healthy." Very underrated aspect of George Karlaftis's production. Again, like I said, he averages 722 snaps per game. So in order to average 722 snaps per game, you have to play 43 snaps per game. So that is did I say averaging 722 snaps per game? Averages 722 snaps per season. I don't know if I misspoke there, but that is an average of 43 snaps per game. Basically, you're looking at 2/3 of a game. Like you think that I think you kind of rationalize it out as 60 snaps on either side of the ball per game is kind of a ballpark. So you're looking at a guy who's playing 2/3 of the defense for your team right there. So very, very underrated aspect of George Karlaftis' game is that he is always healthy. Justin says, "Furious George is our best grunt, just a grinder. I could see him with a machine gun on the battlefield." The interesting thing about this defense really is how many of those guys there are, how many of the scroungers. A couple days ago, I talked about the training camp darlings at the linebacker position on this team, and I used the word scroungy, right, for a couple of the guys there. And this defense is built on scroungers. Nick Bolton, absolute scrounger. Undersized, not the fastest guy in the world, doesn't have tons of physical tools, but man, does he want to hit you. George Karlaftis, if memory serves me correctly, the most impressive thing about George Karlaftis' testing was his agility drills. Decent everywhere else, but pretty good agility drills for a guy his size. Absolute scrounger. There's a couple of divas, Chris Jones being one of them, but most of these guys are just dirty football players, right? That's why I'm so confused that we don't see more of Leo Chanel on the field. Justin says, love your analytics. Thanks for the good news alert. Well, Justin, thank you for being here. Let's get back to the article one more time for anyone who's just coming in, just to go over what it is that has happened. This comes to us from Sports Illustrated. Chiefs signed defender George Karlaftis to massive 4-year contract extension. The Kansas City Chiefs have locked up one of their own leading into the 2025 season. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, defensive end George Karlaftis has agreed to a franchise with the franchise to a 4-year, $93 million contract. The massive deal includes $62 million in guarantees and ties the 24-year-old to Kansas City through the 2030 season. Oh, that is another thing that I did not mention with these numbers. So when we go down this group of Pepe says, just came in, I'm flabbergasted. Me too, Pepe. Absolutely wild turn of events here. I was not expecting to see this on the timeline today. So we went over this group of big-time sack masters in the NFL. They average $38.26 million per year. They have a 13 sack per season average. They average $2.94 million per sack. George Karlaftis is going to be averaging $2.76 million per sack, an absolute bargain. But here's one of the aspects that I did not talk about very much with this. TJ Watt, one of those massive guys, 30 years old. Trey Hendrickson, waiting on his massive contract, 30 years old. Myles Garrett, one of those massive guys, 29 years old. Max Crosby, one of those massive players, 27 years old. Nick Bosa, another one of those massive guys, 27 years old. Then we have Danielle Hunter, also 30 years old. George Karlaftis is 24. George Karlaftis is 24 years old. He will end his second contract in the NFL at 28 years old. So, interesting on that count as well. Justin comes and says, hope to see Brandon George make the team, and they need to use Leo more. I think they do that. I think they do that to deflate the players' numbers so they don't have to pay them on the second contract. Well, it didn't happen with George Karlaftis here. I really don't know what it is with Leo Chanel. I thought that it might be sort of he doesn't look the best in coverage. That's what I thought might have been the issue with Leo Chanel. But then we had last season from Nick Bolton, and Nick Bolton looked absolutely terrible last season in coverage. So I don't know what the holdup is on Leo Chanel getting on the field. Also on Brandon George, I don't know how many linebackers the Kansas City Chiefs are going to carry. This is going to be a very interesting season. The Kansas City Chiefs love to seem to have 25 players on offense, 25 players on defense, and then carry 3 special teamers, right? They do that pretty well. It's going to be so hard to cut this year. They have so many guys throughout this roster that are legitimate NFL guys that I think they're going to have a hard time. Brandon George, I made this point in the Camp Darlings linebacker video. I don't think he has to be a football player. I think that Brandon George can make the team by being an incredible athlete for a couple seasons. Because how much linebacker do you have to be able to play to go out there and make a tackle on punt team? How much linebacker do you have to be able to play to run the 20 yards that it takes to cover a kickoff these days? Right? I think that is what he has to do. That is what Jack Cochran did at first. He was just a special teams guy, and he was a very good athlete. Pepe says, Leo needs to take FAU's spot. I want to see him at defensive end. I want to see him at defensive tackle. I don't care where he is on the field. I just want to see Leo Chanel playing football. I think that he could play edge, when we I'll pull up his physicals here. We'll not his physical. That would be strange. Allegedly, I have nothing to do with that. Leo Chanel RAS. I'm sure this is absolutely suspenseful to watch me pull up things on my phone. I apologize. 6'2.5", so a little short for a defensive end. 31-inch arm length. That is brutal for a defensive end. 250 pounds on the lighter side for a defensive end. 34 reps of the bench press. That would be a plus for a defensive tackle, let alone a defensive end, let alone a linebacker. 40.5-inch vertical leap would probably be in the 99th percentile for defensive ends. 10-foot 8-inch broad jump, probably again 99th percentile for defensive ends. A 4.53 40-yard dash, absolutely incredible for defensive ends. 10-yard split of 1.5 flat. This man is 6'3", 250, running that first 10 yards in 1.5 flat. A short shuttle of 4.24, which is probably 98th percentile for defensive ends. A 3-cone drill of 6.98, probably 90th percentile for defensive ends. So you are looking at a player, if he had longer arms, they may have made this move. The issue there is getting that arm out on the offensive tackle, and can you extend and keep that tackle off of you? Justin says, I know, but he will get poached by Tennessee if they try to sneak him on the practice squad. Oh, Brandon George will get poached by Tennessee, you think? I had not heard anything about Tennessee and Brandon George. That would be disappointing. Pepe says 99.9. Justin says, Leo the Lion is an animal. Absolute animal. Lionheart Leo Chanel. Udochukwu? Did I get that right? Says McDuffie will get signed. I think so. I think that this is making I think that what this is setting the table for McDuffie to get signed. I think that this is a move that is perhaps necessary in order to really see where things are on the field, or in the books, I guess I should say. Should not mix those metaphors like that. Justin says, I bet they trade McDuffie for a boatload of draft picks, sadly. That is a realistic possibility. It's going to be a nail biter to get down, because here's the one thing that makes you think. So you hear that and you think, oh, there's no chance. There's no chance, no shot. Brett Veach loves defensive backs. Brett Veach knows corners. Brett Veach finally has a golden boy at the corner position. He's going to keep him. He's going to lock him up for years to come. Brett Veach also really loves to draft corners. What if Brett Veach can flip Trent McDuffie for... What if he can flip Trent McDuffie for 2 firsts, a third, and a fifth? We didn't think it would happen with Tyreek Hill, and then it did. And guys, it launched the dynasty. So I think that always is a legitimate shot to have happen. Arrowhead says Royals win. Are you talking about Jalen Royals? Justin says, no way we can afford McDuffie unless they break out the GOP calculator. Voodoo math is the only thing that can save us. You might be right, Justin. I might be just making things up. I have said the whole time that since this rumor started, that maybe what this is you have a tentative agreement with Trent McDuffie, and all you're doing is setting the table, right, for the rest of the roster. But you might be absolutely correct. Justin says, just like Tyreek, he figured it out. That's true. But then Justin says, maybe if the cap keeps going. Yeah, it is a very quickly inflating salary cap in the NFL. So very interesting to see how this goes. But guys, I think I am going to go ahead and get out of here. I gotta go to bed. I have to be up in not so long to go to work. But anyway, guys, George Karlaftis re-signed, extended for the Kansas City Chiefs 4 years, $93 million, an average of $2.76 million per sack on average. This is a step down from the $2.94 million that the big boys in the NFL average. Good seeing all of you. I will be back tomorrow with something else. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.